A very good morning, sir, from India. This is Dr. Ritesh Narula here, the instructor for this instruction course. We welcome you to AIOC, and I'm really honored to have you with us on this session for your keynote address, sir. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I have already sent the recorded presentation. Are you going to?
Mr. Ajay, do we have sir's presentation with you?
If you don't have, then I can try from my side. Because I was instructed that
the scientific person said he did not have it, sir. So I think it will be great if you can start it from your end itself, sir.
Respected chairperson of the session and dear audience, I welcome you all to my today's presentation. Phacoemulsification in compromised.
Video is not showing.
Sir, we can't see your presentation, sir.
So we can only hear it. We can't see the presentation, sir.
Is it?
Maybe as usual smooth, fibrous, wrinkled, plain, pseudo-exfoliated, and there may be some
Minimize the window, sir. Please stop sharing again, share.
Maybe
You stop sharing, sir, and then share. Open the presentation and then share.
Okay, just wait, please. Okay. Can you see my slides?
No, sir, we
Please
cannot.
share again, sir.
Okay, just wait, please. Actually, I was instructed to send the recorded presentation. Anyway, I am having this thing with me. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see them now,
Yes,
sir.
we can see.
Can you see now?
Yes, sir.
chairperson of the session and dear audience, I welcome you all to my today's presentation, phacoemulsification in compromised capsulorhexis. I don't have any financial interest. Anterior capsule may be as usual smooth, fibrous, wrinkled, plain, pseudo-exfoliated, and there may be synechia also. Compromised anterior capsule may be at the start of the rhexis, may be at the midway, even may be at the end of the rhexis. Anytime it may happen. Cause compromised rex capsule, instrumental fault, improper handling, and sometimes without any reason. Phaco in compromised capsulorhexis is a bit tricky. Proper handling of phaco probe, proper phacodynamics, anterior chamber maintenance, and care to the capsule margin is utmost important. Here, I want to share a few videos. You see, it usually happens in the milky white cataracts. This is a case because just started the capsulorhexis. It's going fine. Filling with the capsulorhexis fossa. Things are going okay. And you can see, here is the shear force which extended further. So, I have cut the margin with the Venus scissor, formed the capsule with the viscoelastics, and rotated the nucleus. Now I started doing phaco. Scalping is going on. Breaking of the nucleus with chopping mode, rotating, making a multiple piece, and doing the phacoemulsification slowly with controlled phaco power. You see, it is being done quite smoothly. Now, cortical removal is being done using the simple cannula to give less pressure on the capsulorhexis part. Then a foldable single piece intraocular lens was implanted. I did not try to rotate too much and removing the remaining viscoelastics, and the surgery is good. Here's another one. Again, it is a milky white cataract. Now, AC was filled with viscoelastics, huge amount of liquid white material. It was aspirated with cannula. Then again, I started doing the capsular. Things are going very fine. But you see, just at this point, it extended. So I have to cut the margin. And here is the weak point. You see, the weak point is
Recording in progress.
I'm not trying to put the inside of it.
I wish after your presentation, we will come back and very bad.
That is moderators.
Anyway, whatever it is, I have not. I have never. I'm not sure how many of
Very
Whatever the class which is taken from the patient from another day to day. So this is a very old technique instead long time ago, and some of the models
foldable.
it makes patients blood and the asthma and
So that
again wait for a few minutes long enough and then take it. I usually drink the transfer about 2 hours before the surgery. In the morning, until it is needed before on all the day of surgery, not in all the patients because the stability is of paramount importance. Because you will culture and micro lab people cannot be following current techniques. So you can ask for
extension in the proximal portion. So again, I did not try too much. Just with the chopping mode, holding the nucleus, brought out in the capsular party, and slowly, tracheoemulsification was done. And here, very nicely, cortical removal was done with simple cannula. Now I try to introduce a foldable single pulse intraocular lens. And unfortunately, you see the haptics was reversed. And while putting the nucleus lens inside the bag, probably the margin of the haptics touched the posterior capsule, so there was PC here. So enterotomy was done, and the AC was cleared with of vitreous, and the whole chamber was filled with air, and the wound was closed. The surgery is over. The last one, again, a white cataract. As usual, we started, and you see, I tried to make a spiral axis. Again, what happened here actually, I tried to remove some of the liquid material with simple cannula, but with the end of the single cannula, margin of the capsule was touched, so there was extension. This time, I did not try to do the freckle because the consistency of nucleus is very hard. So I enlarged the bone and removed the complete whole nucleus with practice. And then cortical removal was done. And a PNMA lens was put at the back. And the bone was closed with 10 monofilament nylon. Remaining viscoelastics was removed. And the surgery is over. So, all this video I have shown, it is not a standard phaco surgery. Whenever the surgery is smooth and things are going in my way, we can complete it very smoothly. But whenever there is anything unusual, like the disruption of the capsule, we have to take the decision at the spot. We may proceed to complete the phaco, or we may convert it to SICS, or we may bring the complete nucleus enlarged in the home. Things will depend on the situation, and we have to complete the surgery without making any complications to the patient. So prevention is better. Still, phaco is possible if there is any disrupted capsule. Careful not to extend at posterior further. Patient safety is the most important. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much, sir. That was quite an interesting presentation. Very tough situations where you handled your Rexix extension and beautifully managed those cases. It actually very nicely sets up our instruction course also, because wherein in our instruction course, we are going to present certain difficult scenarios wherein we as VR surgeons with our tools can help anterior segment surgeons with certain innovations to really counter such difficult scenarios. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you,
With this,
sir.
sir,
Desh, I have a small request to make in case I can present early, because there is one
sure,
session.
sir.
Yeah.
Sure,
Sorry
sir.
sorry
I'll-
for this.
I'll just introduce the session and then hand it over to you, sir.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good afternoon to all of you. I'll be I invite you to this welcome you to this wonderful session of innovative solutions for complex anterior segment situations. I'm Dr. Ritesh Narula, the instructor for this instruction course. We have no financial interest by any of the speakers in any of the products shown in this presentation. In day-to-day scenarios, anterior segment surgeons do encounter certain difficult situations such as hazy corneas, difficult rents, capsule extensions, high intraocular pressure encountered in the middle of a surgery, uncontrolled IOP, endophthalmitis. All these are complex situations which an anterior segment surgeon can encounter. And herein we, as a group of anterior segment and VR surgeons, are presenting certain unique innovations which can be done to help you go through this with the help of certain basic instruments available in most of the OTs today. I would like to introduce you to the stars of the show. I am very honored to have a galaxy of wonderful seniors of mine with whom I have had a pleasure to learn so much over the last 10 years at Center for Sight. We have our own very incoming president, Dr. Lalit Verma, sir, Dr. Dinesh Talwar, sir, a prolific retina surgeon, Dr. Harsh Kumar, sir, a well-renowned figure in the field of glaucoma, Dr. Hemlata Gupta, a par excellence cataract surgeon, and the last, not the least, but the most important person who is the brainchild behind this instruction course, Dr. Avninder Gupta. Most of these surgeries somewhere have had an origin from his brain. He has been kind of innovator to this whole innovations concept, which is coming out of Center for Sight for the last 3 years as an instruction course. I'll introduce you to the trocar cannula system, the tool of the trade, which we use in most of these surgeries. I'll quickly go through what this trocar cannula system basically means. It is going to be used in most of these surgeries. It's very commonly seen by all VR surgeons. For anterior segment surgeons, this may be not a surprise or a new tool now. It basically consists of a set of 3 trocars and cannulas. So basically, it's a sharp spear-shaped trocar over which a cannula is threaded. And As you can nicely see here, the trocar cannula system nicely, it's a smooth entry and exit for this cannula over the trocar. And this is what we'll be using in most of our surgeries as an innovative concept. It's very easy to put into the globe, easy for anybody to master this technique. It takes a few basic steps. At 4 millimeter in a phakic eye, at 3 millimeter in a pseudophakic or an aphakic eye, you just go as a two-step entry, initially going at about 15 degrees to the globe and then about 80 degrees. You can plug it either with an infusion tube if you are combining it with a VR surgery, or a plug also. So with basic introduction to the tool, I would hand over first. I would like to invite Dr. Lalit Verma sir. Lalit Verma sir needs no introduction. Lalit, he is our incoming president of AIOS. Sir is a very well-renowned VR surgeon, is a head of department at Retina Services at Center for Sight. Over to you, sir, for your presentation, sir. Sir, your audio is switched off, sir.
Is it okay now? Can you hear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you, Ritesh, for conceptualizing this holding hand kind of webinar, where posterior segment surgeon holds the hand of posterior segment surgeon in the best interest of the patient. You see, basic bottom line here is that how should patient get the best with no ego at either end. So I'll be talking something about PCR. PCR does happen. Whosoever operates, PCR can happen at least. More common in the initial 100 cases of learning phase. But what we see day in and day out is overconfidence. Overconfidence of a renowned surgeon also. And generally what will happen is, in a hurry, at the fag end of the case, this disaster may happen and surgeon is in a hurry. You see, issues never PCR. Issue PCR because it can happen. If you operate, complications will happen. And the only person who does not have complication is person who does not operate. So issue is not PCR for me. Issue is how it is managed at time, because this will determine the fate of the eye. If you do not know the steps of management PCR, then you can make or mar this eye. Patient can have excellent visual recovery also, and patient can have problems later on. It's not only CME and other things we are bothered. We are also bothered for things like giant retinal tear and retinal detachments. So I'll just take help of a couple of videos. So this is one video. Is it visible? So
Visible, sir.
Yeah, PCR has taken place, and notice what is going on at this moment. The pupil has dilated, chamber has become suddenly deep, fag end of surgery, and surgeon now does this vitrectomy with the help of cannula inserted and then cutter inserted, and going all across, and then seeing the support, adequacy of the support, brings in a 3-piece lens. So this is a blind kind of vitrectomy. I don't think vitreous is visible. So whatever was being done was a blind kind of vitrectomy. This is not an adequate job done. So because if you don't see the vitreous, you cannot be 100% sure that job has been done. So what we advocate is that if you have this unfortunate scenario of put tricot, couple of drops of tricot, do the same job as was being done before. You see, then you would see these vitreous fibrils. You could then chase these vitreous fibrils and ensure that adequate vitrectomy. And you are very specific. Like you see this vitreous in the 4 o'clock position. So here you are cutting a definitive thing, because a clear vitreous is never visible so clearly. So that is the rationale of putting in a couple of drops of tricot and do what we say tricot assisted vitrectomy. So best is to call a VR surgeon if you're not very familiar. So if VR surgeon not at hand, what should be done is what I showed in the previous video, that do a good anterior vitrectomy, our aim is that there should be no vitreous in the anterior chamber, no vitreous in the wound, and at the end of it, nice round pupil. Sometimes you can inject a myotic also, and just to see the roundness of the pupil, and there's no vitreous fibrils. But do not do a blind vitrectomy. Do not, pull the vitreous too much. You should have a good cutter which has the purpose of cutter should not be only suction, because normally you see a cutter surgeon may have only a old cutter which may suck more and cut less. So that is not the thing. Best would be to call a VR surgeon if he's available. He could do a definitive job and a good job. So in the event of crisis of this PCR, and if you want your patient to do well, and you see these 4 or 5 photographs which I put on the bottom slide, like a giant tear or a PVR or a TAS kind of syndrome or detachments here, they're all actual examples of patients who have mismanaged kind of PCR. You see the upper video with what you see. This video also illustrates if the nucleus or the cortical matter goes down, then I think you should not chase that. Do not do this heroic measures of putting Vectis inside the AC and complicating the matters. Believe me, this kind of maneuvers will satisfy your ego immediately, but in the long run, they are all harmful for the patient. You see the way vitreous was getting swept away with the help of a swab stick is not allowed, not done in nowadays with such a good vitreous cutters and suction available. And chasing these fragments is not a good idea either. So if you want to manage the patient well, if you want your patient to do well, if you do not want these complications, do not want CME detachments later on, respect the vitreous. And respect the vitreous by doing proper vitrectomy or call in a vitreous surgeon to manage the job. Because ultimate bottom line is that patient should do well. And why a chromovitrectomy? Because as I said, clear vitrectomy is not, clear vitreous is difficult to see, and vitrectomy, blind vitrectomy, I don't advocate at all. Triamcinolone has the property that it gets adsorbed onto the vitreous fibrils and thereby makes the job easier and definitive job, and a specific job is done. It facilitates precise job, complete job, and reduces chance of complication. So this was anterior root management, but best would be to get familiarized with the trocar canal system, which Ritesh very nicely showed in the beginning. Get familiarized with this trocar canal system, because the best way is through the kind of being done. This, as I said, the clear road that we do it. So that ensures the proper cutting of not because there was this animated video which is available on the YouTube by Dr. Vasavada, which shows that if you do the superior, the red color vitreous is drawn back from the vent. So vent means hollow inside. However, you pull the vitreous from the anterior root. So red color thing is being pulled from the chamber. And what is happening? Here becomes ragged and enlarged. So, hence the rationale of doing it from the pars plana root. So this case exemplifies what I was trying to say. So here the anterior segment surgeon has done rhexis, the rhexis has gone haywire, but is still confident and determined to take out this lenticular matter, which is really soft in consistency. So he still tries, but he's not sure. So therefore, a posterior segment surgeon is now called upon. He makes this 3 ports trocar cannula, which Ritesh had shown, and which I feel should be mastered by every cataract surgeon also. It's not difficult, believe me. Everything is a mind block. So now he enters from the pars plana and does the, removes this lenticular matter, and vitreous also is being cut. It's not being dragged, and a relatively easier job compared to, jugglery, which sometimes can be done from the AC route. This is a very controlled kind of job which is being done. And then after this adequate job has been done, then you can put in the lens on the rexus also. So this is the way the PCR should ideally be managed. Best route is posterior Parsonage route, and in case you are not familiar, then you should do a triamcinolone assisted anterior vitrectomy and be very careful to remove the last bit also. So PCR from the limbus route has advantages, and PCR from the anterior segment route has a lot of disadvantages. So PCR from the pars plana, there is no extension of PCR, no traction on the retina, and ensures relatively complete removal of vitreous. Whereas if you do PCR management from the limbus route, there is a possibility of extension of rent. There is a possibility that you may leave behind residual vitreous. Also, there is a possibility that future traction onto the retina may occur. So, just to summarize again, learn to use this trocar canal system, because vitrectomy from the pars plana route is better. And in case you are not familiar, do triamcinolone assisted vitrectomy. That will help save a lot of these complications which are there on the right hand side. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Lalit sir, for such a lucid presentation. Next, I'd like to call Dr. Ritesh Narula, who is a senior consultant and a prolific vitreoretinal surgeon, and also masters the art of helping other anterior segment surgeon and glued IOL, describing a new technique which we have published also, that is vitreous decompression. Actually, vitreous decompression का genesis ऐसे हुआ कि one of our anterior segment surgeon, Dr. Ritika, was moving to and fro, saying ki what case it is, and it's a very shallow anterior chamber. The tensions are 40, and the anterior chamber does not have any space. So she said, how will I operate this case? So we said, we'll create a space in the anterior segment, we'll decompress the vitreous, and once we'll decompress the vitreous, your job will be much easier. And that's how we started doing vitreous decompression. And the technique will be described by Dr. Ritesh Narula, and you will see how it helps anterior segment surgeons to do their job nicely and easily in a very difficult scenario. Dr. Ritesh, please.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll be starting my presentation now. I'll be talking about an innovation that we developed, as Dr. Gupta said, was the need of an hour when we were, our anterior segment surgeons were struggling with cases who had a very shallow AC and a high upthrust. How to manage those cases, they were having a struggle with that. So that was the genesis of this particular technique. Now, as we all know, phacoemulsification in shallow AC is quite challenging for any cataract surgeon. This can happen in cases of intumescent cataracts, in patients who have phacomorphic glaucoma, small eyes, hyperopia, or even in patients who have pre-existing glaucoma where the intraocular pressures are high and the upthrust from the vitreous is very high. Very often they even struggle to get the instruments inside. And in this process, if they try too hard, one can land up with endothelial compromise, Descemet's detachment, the rexus may extend, the zonules may get pulled up, and a dialysis may happen. And so all this high vitreous pressure increases the risk of the posterior capsular rent. There is repeated iris prolapse. And if you're not very controlled during the surgery and the decompression happens too suddenly, you can even land up with a suprachoroidal hemorrhage and an expulsive choroidal hemorrhage also. So how does one generally manage such situation? One option is the standard practice, which is a very controlled paracentesis is done with the viscoelastic in another hand, and IV mannitol is given pre-operatively, but this may not work in all such cases. Other options which have been advised is that one can go in the vitreous cavity with a needle and aspirate some bit of vitreous. You can go with a cutter blindly behind the lens and cut some amount of vitreous and do a core vitrectomy there. You can, if the lens is too intermittent, one has been advised to go into the lens capsule and aspirate some of the lens material. But all these techniques are fraught with a lot of risks and complications because they're very often blindly being done. So herein we describe the technique of vitreous decompression. I'll show you through this video. So this is a patient who had phacomorphic glaucoma. It was an old lady and a phacomorphic glaucoma. The chamber was hardly there. So as the first step of the surgery, we put in a trocar cannula infratemporally, about 3.5 millimeter posterior to the limbus. It's a non-valved 23 gauge trocar cannula system. And since it's an old patient, the vitreous starts to flow out from this opening. And on a high cut rate, we just cut this vitreous. There's very low vacuum. We are not causing any traction on the vitreous. We are just cutting that vitreous which is egressing out of the trocar. This will cause the eye to become soft, gives you space in the eye, and allows the anterior segment surgeon to now go in and start the surgery. So nice rhexis is possible now since the chamber is deep and the upthrust is less. The lens is quite thick and the cataract surgery is now started and the nucleus is getting emulsified. And we'll show you the flexibility of this procedure. What happens now intraoperatively, again, the pressure starts to build up. The surgeon is trying to put in the instrument again. Again, there's an upthrust. You can see the iris again blocking the wound there. It is starting to prolapse out. No worries. Just go back to the same site which we had made earlier. Remove the plug or the infusion. Again, do a little bit more vitrectomy. Again, the globe becomes soft. You go back in, put in more viscoelastic, deepen the AC, and you are safely able to maneuver the surgery now. And now you can place your lens in the bag. So it allows you a nice, safe surgery without any risk either to the retina or to the lens throughout the procedure. And that port can be left sutureless. It's a 23 gauge sutureless port. So a very safe technique to kind of manage this upthrust and to allow for a safe anterior segment or a cataract surgery there. This can also be done in case you have an intraocular rise in IOP. Again, the trocar cannula can come pretty handy.
Thank you, Dr. Ritesh, for a nice presentation. Actually, if Dr. Kamrul is here, then he can use this technique, and I can assure you 100% that rhexis extension won't be there if you use this technique. Especially in phacomorphic, hypermature, the cases what you showed us, where you had a lot of difficulty in doing a capsular rhexis. What it does is, without doing much of a maneuver, there is a liquefied vitreous and there is a formed vitreous. So liquefied vitreous directly gets egressed from the trocar cannula, and the formed vitreous, which tends to plug the trocar cannula, is taken care by the cutter. So the decompression is from the vitreous cavity. So what you are doing, you are decompressing the vitreous cavity, and the important thing here is there is no sudden decompression. In anterior segment decompression, the decompression is sudden. So what you will land up with an expulsive or a sudden shallowing edge chamber. In this, the decompression is very slow because of the formed vitreous, and it's from behind. So the whole of the lens iris complex goes behind, and it gives space in the anterior segment, and thus we can do a good phacoemulsification surgery in these kind of cases. Important thing, Dr. Kamrul, I'll suggest that any phacomorphic, any hypermature cataract, you can try this technique, and I can assure you, you will get 100% success. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Hemlata Gupta. He is one of the best surgeons in Center for Sight group of hospitals, does all complex surgery. But one certain day when I entered into the theater, Dr. Hemlata Gupta called me and said, "Sir, see, this is a blast injury. It's a subluxated lens. I can't see the iris. The lens is subluxated. And if it drops, then it's your ball game and it's the only eye, so you will have to manage. ये बात सुन के मेरे तो पसीने उड़ गए. So I said, wait, we'll try some other technique. You want a glow? So I'll give you glow. So what I did, I put a chandelier light. And a chandelier light, once you make it more vertical, what happens? It gives a very good red glow. During the period of surgery, we realized that if you put off the microscope also, microscope light also, then also you will get a very good depth of perception and very good glow. And she was able to complete the surgery without any complication in an extremely difficult case. And that's how we innovated this technique, what we call as in chandelier illumination assisted phacoemulsification in hazy cornea. And Dr. Hemlata Gupta will try to explain how she is managing these kind of difficult cases in her presentation. Dr. Hemlata, you can continue. Hemlata, आवाज नहीं आ रही है आपकी.
Can you hear me, sir, now?
Yes, yes, yes.
A very good morning to all of you. And thank you, Dr. A.G. sir, for introducing chandelier to us and making our lives much easier. So, I think so we all encountered such dense bad corneal opacities in our OPD practice. And doing phacoemulsification under conventional microscopic illumination, as Dr. A.G. has suggested, is really difficult because of the poor intraoperative visibility. So what happens is, in patients with corneal opacities, light from the microscope is unable to enter inside the eye and gets scattered, causing poor red glow and hence decreasing the depth perception, which is very important for the subsequent cataract surgery steps. So there are various techniques to enhance the intraoperative visibility. We use trypan blue dye, but that helps us only at the step of the capsulorhexis. And we can create pupillary sphincterotomies, but that will lead to permanent damage to the iris tissue. We can use endo illuminators that can be placed in the interior chamber or in the pars plana area. The interior chamber illumination using an illuminator is a very useful technique. It's very simple, but only in cases of mild to moderate corneal haze. The only problem with the interior chamber illuminator is that you need a trained technician to hold the light pipe in position so that the surgeon can do bimanual manipulations, and it doesn't provide you with a very good depth perception. So these problems are not there with the chandelier. So how does the chandelier system work? Like we have seen that when the light falls onto the opacified cornea, it gets scattered, and that is what leading to intraoperative poor visibility. So with the chandelier's wide angle illumination, when the light falls onto the cornea, it actually gets reflected back as shown in this picture. And that gives us a very good red glow as seen in the bottom picture, and it increases the depth perception for subsequent steps. So there are various endo illuminators available in the market. Why does the conventional light source doesn't work in these cases? So what happens is, with 20 gauge endolight, we used to use halogen or metal halide illumination. And when we shifted to the smaller gauge surgery, like 25 or 27 gauge surgery, the illumination that could be achieved with halogen or metal halide was just 50% of the original. So to compensate for this decrease in the illumination, there are certain new light sources that were introduced, like xenon or mercury vapor illumination. The increased lumens of light with the xenon light sources were substantial. Even with 25 gauge or 27 gauge optic fiber, we could achieve illumination much brighter than that as compared to 20 gauge fiber. There are several standalone xenon lighter illuminators that are commercially available. We here at Center for Sight are using Photon by Synergistic. Mercury vapor illumination is a much more powerful source than xenon arc, with a luminous efficacy up to 402 lumens per watt, which is much brighter than any other commercially available xenon light illuminator. So Chandelier is particularly useful in like one-eyed patient who might be at risk, high-risk candidate for combined surgeries like combined corneal transplantation with cataract surgery. And most of us are reluctant to touch such cases, fearing intraoperative complications. So here I'll be showing two such cases where we could actually do successful surgery by using chandelier illumination. So this was one such patient who was one-eyed with a central dense corneal opacity.
Hemlata, we can't see your video.
I'll just stop sharing and maybe reshare again.
नहीं inserted है video की नहीं है inserted.
Yes, sir, it's
You can,
inserted.
you can share the video directly.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, it's visible.
So this is a case of such dense central corneal opacity where we're placing chandelier in the pars plana area, 4 millimeter away from the limbus, and we make it vertical to get this good red glow. And then we switch on the microscope light, and after staining the capsule with the tryptophan blue dye, just see how good the red glow is. You just don't feel that there is a corneal opacity. And under excellent visualization, I could do the capsular excess safely. And here we are doing hydrodissection. And see, when after hydrodissection, actually the visibility goes down. But with the chandelier illumination, we get such good depth perception that makes our chopping also easy. We can visualize the posterior capsule, anterior capsule margin, and complete the emulsification of the nucleus fragments safely. So even cortical matter aspiration is a little difficult, and this is at this step actually when you can cause zonular dialysis also because of pulling of the rhexis margin. But with chandelier, we are able to complete all these steps very easily, and under direct visualization, IOL is also placed safely inside the capsular bag. And in the end, we just do the stromal hydration and pull out the chandelier without applying any suture. So it is self-sealing. So this is another case. Can you see the video, sir?
नहीं, video नहीं देख रहा. Screen share करो.
And now, sir?
You can see the presentation, not the video.
Video. Linked है video. Linked
Okay,
video.
I have the link of the video. I'll just play it separate. Give me a second.
Screen दिख रही है, but video is not playing. Slide screen is there.
On the same slide, sir, let me just try once more. Is it visible now, sir?
Yeah, you can see the screen, and we can start the video.
I have already started the video.
नहीं दिखेगा. You can continue with your presentation.
Okay, all right.
If
sir.
it is not
Just
inserted, you won't be
I'll
able
just-
to show it.
So, is my PPT visible?
नहीं, you
Not
have
yet.
not yet.
You'll have to stop sharing this and then restart, reshare. Yeah.
So the advantages of the chandelier illumination are it is a smaller gauge surgery, and it allows us easy entry without the need of any conjunctival peritomy. And by virtue of its self-retaining design, it allows all the bimanual manipulations. And because of the wide angle illumination, there is a 4-fold increase in contrast and 2-fold increase in resolution when the illuminator is placed behind the cataract. There is much lesser corneal scatter and better anterior segment visualization. And we might avoid the need of high-risk open sky cataract surgery if we're using chandelier, and it's very easy to remove, leaving the self-sealing wound. Now, as with all other endo illuminators, phototoxicity is still a concern, and therefore current commercially available xenon arc illuminators, they feature lower wavelength filters, cutting off the ultraviolet and blue light to reduce the phototoxicity. Though it's more of a concern in retinal surgery because they are of longer duration, and in cataract surgery, it doesn't matter much. So to conclude, chandelier's illumination is really helpful technique for enhancing the intraoperative view in hazy corneas, and it provides us with high intensity hands-free source of endo illumination, and it can be safely adopted by most of the cataract surgeon in the presence of mild, moderate to even denser corneal opacities. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hemlata, for such an interesting presentation. Chandelier illumination is something which has really made a difference to not just cataract surgery with hazy corneas. Other anterior segment surgeries, we have used chandelier illumination with even grafts, even with glued IOL, wherein a DSEC with a glued IOL was being planned. So anywhere where we feel that the anterior segment, the cornea is hazy enough to not give us a nice anterior segment view, we have found the chandelier illumination to come to our rescue there. Thank you, Dr. Hemlata. Moving on to
Dr. Ritesh.
Yes, sir.
This is Dr. Kamrul Khan from Bangladesh.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much, sir, everybody. As I am working in a COVID designated hospital, I have to leave now, sir. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful experience to be with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Dr. Avninder Gupta, sir. Avninder, sir, is a vitreoretinal surgeon. More than that, an amazing innovator. He keeps coming up with his wonderful ideas to kind of not just in VR surgery, but in anterior segment surgery to help his colleagues come up with unique solutions. And in one such topic, he'll be talking about where he'll be using the vitreous scissors and forceps to help in anterior segment reconstructions. Dr. Avninder Gupta, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Ritesh, from a vitreoretinal surgeon. Now I designate myself as an anterior segment reconstruction surgeon. It's a new upcoming branch, and I should ask other fellows and younger colleagues to join this branch, that is anterior segment reconstruction. In the era of super specialty, many a times we are unaware what is happening in other specialties. We also forget to peep into other specialties about new instruments, machine, how they can help in your specialty. 23 gauge and 25 gauge micro scissors and forceps were first introduced in vitreoretinal surgeries. These instruments have found a way in various anterior segment surgeries also, like pupilloplasty, DSEC, and glued IOL. I'll be talking in this talk, I'll be talking about pupilloplasty. Pupilloplasty is a surgical procedure to alter the shape or function of the pupil to prevent a glare. Now, this is one of the patient has traumatic subluxated cataract with mid-dilated pupil with sphincter tear. So, anterior segment surgeon did an MICS with ECR with IOL. And you can see this is a mid-dilated pupil. There is a slightly decentered lens, or because of the dilatation, the lens is not centered. Because the edge of the lens is coming into the pupillary axis, the diffraction from the edge of the lens causes disturbing halos, and patient says, whenever I drive, my life is a hell, night time I can't drive, my life ends at 6 o'clock, all this kind of excuses. And every day he used to come into the OPD and sit and describe his agony about his life. So we thought, yes, we should go ahead and decrease his agony. So we planned for a pupilloplasty. What we did here first, we made a paracentesis, and after that the pilocarpine was injected. You can see the pupil is constricting, and this helps us to take where the sutures can be taken. This is a straight needle on 10-0 Merceline. We call it an STT6. We call this as an STT6 needle. The iris is engaged. The other end of the iris is also engaged in the suture. Then the needle is docked into an 23 gauge curved cannula and is brought out through the paracentesis. You can see the engaged iris tissue here. Once the suture is brought out, the distal, this is what we call as a distal end, this is the proximal end. The distal end of the suture is pulled out, and now what you have is 3 sutures here. This is 1 suture, 2 suture, and 3 suture. So you have to take 4 throws or 3 throws in this suture, and this will be the tying knot. And this knot, we call it as a Siepsel's knot. This is a sliding knot where the knot is put outside the eye, and once we pull the proximal and the distal end, you can see the sliding knot inside, and its tightening of the pupil is done. The second throw is taken, and similarly the suture is cut, and this is the end result. You can see it now, the pupillary, at the pupillary edge you cannot see the edge of the IOL, and post-operatively this patient was happy. This is another patient. This was Dr. Lalit's patient, had undergone trauma and came with retinal detachment with subluxated lens. So a lensectomy, vitrectomy was done with silicone oil injection, and you can see an inferior SI in emulsified oil in the anterior segment. So we planned for an Bluetstell fixated IOL with removal of oil plus pupilloplasty. So once the what you do, you coat the endothelium with chondroitin sulfate and just press the posterior lip. The infusion is there. The oil comes out through this tunnel. Then the 3-piece IOL is injected into the eye. The important thing here is catch the tip and only externalize once the whole lens is delivered. The second haptic is also externalized, and these haptics are internalized into chariot tunnel, which is made by 26 gauge needle. Once this is done, 10-0 suture is taken on STC6 needle. The iris is engaged, and then this needle is docked into a 23 gauge cannula and is brought out through the paracentesis. What we'll be practicing is in 4-throw pupilloplasty. What you do, you have 3 sutures like I showed you in the last video. You give 4 throws. You need not to give 3, 2, 1. So once the 4th throw is given, the knot slides in, and you can see we have constructed the pupil. The sutures are cut with the help of vanas, and glue is placed over the flaps. And this is the post-operative picture. This patient improved with 6/9 vision. This is another patient. We did a glued IOL in this patient. Because of the trauma, you can see the pupils are not constricting. This is without any mydriasis. And important thing here is don't put adrenaline into the vitreous fluid or the cannula. The pupil size is checked, you make paracentesis, one at 5 o'clock, one at 10 o'clock, and another at 2 o'clock. So edges of the pupil are taken and it's docked into the needle. This needle is brought out through this paracentesis, and the other end of the needle is again taken, and we take small bites of the pupillary margins and bring it out from this paracentesis. And the third thing, we do it again from nasal to the temporal side. Once 360-degree suturing is done, what we do is we tighten this, and you can see this is how the pupil appears after surgery. So this is the post-operative picture. From 6 millimeter pupil, we were able to reduce it to 3 millimeters. So to sum up, micro scissors and forceps has become an important aid in construction of anterior segment surgery, enhancing our results and making our life easier. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Aminder, sir, for such interesting videos. Before I move ahead, one small question to you. How do you feel is the learning curve when you're dealing with the anterior segment reconstruction? How easy it is to learn the art to use these forceps and scissors comfortably?
Two things are important in this. One, you should be able to use both the hands. Second thing, you should choose the right instrumentation for this. Actually, the best instrument to hold the iris is end opening forceps, or the pick forceps is an ideal one. Pick forceps has a pick like this, and you can pull it in the center, and then you can engage the iris and put the sutures. Second thing, what I am not getting here, I have asked for a rigid. The needle what we are using is a 10 ST C6 needle, and this is a very malleable needle. And once we enter, it tends to go down up. It's not very controllable. So I am looking for a large curved needle. What they show in West, it's very easy to engage and it's slightly tough. So maneuvering it is better as compared to this needle. But this is the only needle which is available here. The other curved needle is not available. So if we get that needle, our job will be much easier in these kind of situations.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Dr. Harsh Kumar, sir. Harsh Kumar, sir, again, needs no introduction. Sir is a well-renowned name in terms of glaucoma. In the field of glaucoma, he is a savior for a lot of glaucoma surgeons managing their complex glaucoma filtration surgeries, failed surgeries. And now he's going to show one of the techniques wherein what is called as posterior Ahmed glaucoma valve or posterior AGV, how it comes to the rescue for failed trabeculectomy surgeries. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Harsh, sir.
Thank you, Ritesh, for having me here, and thank you, AIOS, for giving us this opportunity. And actually, it's very right that all the retina surgeons are here, because actually these are the guys who have made us do all these complicated things, which we are very, very scared to do. And because they are always present, we are lucky enough that we have been able to do these things, and they always come to our help. Otherwise, most of the centers have the people, but they don't have that coordination that they can do. So we have been doing the anterior AGV for a long, long time, and all the difficult cases like Sturge-Weber's, multiple failed surgeries, cases where conventional success is low, fakes, pseudo fakes, NVGs, post PK, post silicone oil, all these cases we have been doing. The problem is the anterior AGV is always fraught with some kind of dangers. You can have a shallow AC, you can have tube touch, you can have tube touch to the cornea, and you can see 3 to 5% ultimately end up in corneal edema. There could be massive choroidals. And how can you put an anterior AGV in a situation like this, where there are 3 trabeculectomies already done, the chamber is extremely shallow, a one-eyed patient? What do you do in such cases? Again, if you have already put an anterior valve here, you are bound to fail because already there are two things which are irritating the cornea, and sooner or later you'll have edema. And it ends up in edema, and obviously people are doing, even in ICE syndromes, they are doing the anterior AGV, which we really don't like, because it's bound to end up in failure. So anywhere where the endothelium is not good, you are not going to be able to get it. Shallow anterior chambers and any post PK, where the hell do you put the valve? Obviously in the posterior chamber, not in the anterior chamber. So this is just to show you a representative case. Now this one-eyed patient came to us, the pressure was very high, had operated outside. The lens is tilted, there are multiple peripheral pass and corneal edema. So the cornea chap says, you first lower the pressure, and no, we'll not do a multiple surgery. So I said, all right, fine, we'll go ahead and do it. And after taking my retina colleagues along with me, we open up the fornix, and we go deep into the fornix. Then we prime our valve first with a strong this thing, and then with a low this thing, to show that it will work in all directions. And then we implanted 10 millimeters behind, and then it is anchored with the help of non-absorbable sutures. It could be 6280 silk or poly, whatever you are comfortable with. Basically, it is to anchor. Then we create a scleral pocket. A lot of people don't do that, but we usually do that. And then hand it over to the retina chap. These guys will do a 3/4 vitrectomy, because that is the crux of the situation. So for God's sake, please don't underestimate doing a posterior valve. It requires the best and the best of retina surgeons that we have at our place. And obviously others, I'm not rating others, but our guys are really good, because doing a vitrectomy through the cornea that you are seeing is extremely difficult. And then we use a 23 gauge needle to go deep into the center of the vitreous. The tube should be kept a little longer so that it is always visible. And obviously after that we close up. Once the pressure is well controlled, as you can see, we hand it over to the retina and the cornea chap, who together do a glue dial along with a PK. And the patient was very happy. What we learned over the years was that though we thought that doing a scleral pocket was good enough, but we realized that at the junction, many a times there were exposures. We got at least 2 exposure in the 60 cases that we did. So we changed our technique midway, and after around 30 cases, we realized that what we have to do is we have to cover the entire tube. So this is covered by the autosclera, and this is covered by the donor sclera. The importance of the autosclera over here is that it will not, this white sclera, if it is here, it looks very bad, and the patients invariably complain. But as you can see over here, you cannot at all make out that there is any foreign body over here. But the scleral patch lying over there ultimately prevents exposure, and we have never had an exposure after we have started covering the whole tube. A lot of my friends used to say, why don't you use a clip? So this is the clip, which is pars plana clip, which has been provided by the Ahmed people. But unfortunately, though me and my friends tried it out, we ultimately realized that the clip was a huge thing. And not only that, it was expensive. The moment we put it in, it was, though obviously the tilt and everything was good. And the tilted area from where we had exposures is protected. The trouble was that once you tried to cover it up with the conjunctiva, it was a mess. And we and my friend, number of other friends also had exposures, so we gave it up, and we came down to the technique that we just showed you. And obviously it is, I must agree that it is primarily in the realm of the retina surgeons, and what they taught me was that we must have a thorough, good vitrectomy. You have to introduce a PVD, and you have to use tricot so that no vitreous is left behind. Otherwise, at least in 2 cases, we had to go in back and do a repeat vitrectomy to open up the tube. Sometimes, obviously, you can use the YAG laser to just cut if there's only a slight amount of vitreous at the edge of the tube. But otherwise, it has to be a perfect vitrectomy in order to get a success in these kind of cases. So we had done around 60 cases spread over 5 years, pseudofakes, fakes, patients with malignant glaucoma, where superior quadrant was not available and there was a shallow AC. Patients which will undergo PK with PAS, tilted IOLs, bad corneas, neovascular glaucoma, so many of them very, very complicated cases. We have published in Pan American Journal of Ophthalmology in 2020 or whatever we have learned over the previous years. And but please, I do want to tell you that it's not a simple procedure. You can get vitreous incarceration. You always need a good vitreous surgeon and a regular retinal follow-up, which may not be easy. And choroidals, mild vitreous hemorrhage, vitreous blocking the tube, and tube exposure, as I already told you along the way, are some of the major problems that we face. The pressure was controlled without medication in 26%, with one medicine in 52%, two medicines in 13%, three medicines in 9%. And as we go up and we see all the other papers, most of the people have, like Mari et al. Here, have clearly shown that reduction in IOP is similar in anterior and posterior valves, and the complication rate is also almost same. Let us be clear that it is not the same thing. It is a complex procedure. It is to be done only in complicated procedures. We will primarily try and do an anterior valve, but if it cannot be done, you must know, all good glaucoma surgeons must get hold of a good retina person and should be ready to do these posterior valves. It gives you hope where there is sadness and brings a smile, and that is what we all live for. Thank you very much for your time.
Is it the same thing exactly?
Thank you very much, sir. Very nicely shown and very rightly pointed out last slide as hope. One can never leave hope. Complex situation needs complex managements. And one such situation wherein one cannot lose hope is endophthalmitis. And who better than Dr. Dinesh Talwar, sir, to guide us through giving us a view in endophthalmitis, how to manage anterior segment in endophthalmitis cases. I would now like to invite Dr. Dinesh Talwar, sir, to talk about it.
Thank you, Ritesh. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so the key to successful surgical management is good visualization of any field of operation, whatever you're doing. And the way to a successful vitrectomy too is to clearance of an anterior segment haze. In exogenous endophthalmitis, remember, the anterior segment is involved first, and this is followed by progressively deeper levels of vitreous cavity involvement. So if you want to do a successful vitrectomy also, you need to do a good anterior chamber clearance, and this can be done either from the limbus route or from the pars plana route. Then only you can complete the vitrectomy. And of course, if you need to remove an IOL, you may do that, but otherwise, most of the times it will not obstruct your view. The advantages of the limbal route are obviously that it's an easy entry, more maneuverability, but there are disadvantages. The cornea in these cases is edematous. The area where you enter from becomes very friable. Suturing with needles, suturing it could be very difficult later on, and sometimes it keeps leaking during the surgery. And if you're trying to do any surgical manipulation, including scleral depression, the hypotony becomes even more pronounced. So just to show you, this is an example of a limbal approach to the anterior segment management in a endophthalmitis case. And you can see from the limbus, an entry was made and it's being cleared. Now, I think here, because there was also a desire to remove the IOL, so that is why this is a the limbal approach was used over here, because if you have to remove the IOL also, then it doesn't make sense to go from the pars plana. And So here you have the IOL being removed and the vitrectomy being done after that. And so a limbal approach was obviously the way to go. However, let's see this one. Now here to do the vitrectomy, you see this, there's always this fibrin membrane on the anterior chamber. In the anterior chamber, lining the entire iris, and removing this membrane itself makes your visualization very simple. And so, sorry, this is the same thing again. No, but this is one of those very, very sticky membranes and exudates. And here you see carefully, we've gone from the pars plana route. Now look carefully in this area, in where my pointer is. This is the area you will see that we will make a small iridectomy. You will see the movement of the iris coming first, and then you see this, and you can see now the iridectomy being made. There could be some bleeding during this procedure, but it's not an issue. That bleeding will stop on its own later on. So you don't have to do anything for it. The pressure is maintained through the infusion cannula. And now we're using this MVR blade to engage with that membrane. In this case, this was a very, very thick membrane. You can see we're clearing it up from the iris, and then using the cutter to remove the dislodged membrane. And you'll see the difference once you've done this anterior segment. This was looking like a horrible case. Somebody may even say it's inoperable. But the moment you end up clearing this, you suddenly find that the entire picture has changed. And the good thing is the cornea doesn't get affected. The cornea, there's no leakage from the wound at the during the surgery, and by the end of the surgery, no need for suturing is there. And you see this? So this is, so we're clearing up this, and you can see the jet black kind of reflex coming. You can see the IOL, and things become much easier. Now, sorry. Yeah, so now this residual membrane was still there on the iris. We wanted to clear this also. It's easier to clear up by going from the pars plana and using the MVR blade, and with this teasing it off. This was one of the most sticky membranes I'd ever seen, actually. Most of the times this will come out fairly easily, and you can remove it from the entire anterior chamber. But in this case, we had to, take it out in pieces, actually. And after we've dislodged this membrane, then again you will see that we use the cutter and clean it up. Now the IOL is in place. You don't need to disturb the IOL, and you can complete your anterior segment work without having any problem. So this is the advantage of this procedure. Simple, and makes your life very simple. Make sure that you don't disturb the IOL, and then you go ahead with the vitrectomy. Now, if you still have a hazy view after anterior chamber clearance, then you need to take care of the epithelial edema. You do epithelial debridement, and you'll get a clear view in majority of cases. Don't have to worry; it does not increase the risk of infection. Stromal edema is a very rare cause of haze, but if that happens once in a while, you can use 50% glycerine for this, but most of the times this is not necessary. The combination of anterior chamber clearance and epithelial debridement, if required, takes care of your problem in virtually all cases. Ladies and gentlemen, a clear view is a prerequisite for successful surgery. Appropriate anterior segment management is the first step for the same. And you do that, and your surgery will become simple. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Talwar sir. That was some real tough situations that you encountered there. Especially the last one was something which a lot of surgeons would, even RIA surgeons would kind of give up on it. So amazing surgeries there. Thank you, sir. That brings us to the last presentation. It's a short video which I'll be sharing with you. Another useful technique wherein we are combining two uh, innovations in one surgery. And let me just share that presentation with a video with you. I'll be talking about continuous air infusion, something which we can use to support our cornea surgeons when they land up with difficult situation while doing their DSEC surgery. Now we know one of the critical steps in DSEC surgery is to make sure that the lenticule attaches nicely behind the Desmond lenticle attaches nicely behind to the graft to the corneal bed. And this is one of my anterior segment colleague who started out with this surgery. The cornea was not quite, the epithelium was quite hazy, and in order to give him a better visualization of the anterior segment, again we are using there the chandelier illumination, retro illumination, which Dr. Hemlata talked about in her presentation. Now you can nicely see the moment you have a chandelier, you have a great view of the anterior segment. You can really appreciate that you have a nice round pupil here, the pupil size is good enough, the anterior chamber is deep. Now, once he did his DSEC and he had put in his graft, normally the end of that surgery, the step that is required is to put in an air bubble to support this graft in place, keep it in place for about 10 minutes. So this is wherein a Busen glide is being used to put in the DSEC lenticule in. Normally, the process for putting this air bubble is they use a normal paracentesis, and from there an air is injected. A large bubble is put from angle to angle, and it is kept in place. But in this particular case, what was happening was the moment they used to put in air, the air used to leak out because there were so many openings. The scleral rigidity was not good, and the air used to leak out, and the graft never used to stay in place. And that was a struggle that the anterior segment surgeon was going through. And in order to help him here, what we did was we put in a 30 gauge needle on which we attached a vitrectomy machine continuous air infusion pump, setting it at a pressure of 40. Now this, what it does is now it's giving a continuous air infusion supply into the anterior chamber. It will maintain this air-filled anterior chamber like we do it in our vitreous cavity with the fluid air exchange times. The cavity will remain filled with air, and this pressure can now be adjusted to the required settings as required by the anterior segment surgeon, kept there for about 10 minutes. Let this air bubble stay stable throughout the anterior chamber. It will not leak out because the machine is now building up the pressure. And under this continuous air infusion, then he closes his wound also. The graft is also repositioned in its right place. The wound is sutured with 10-0. And once the required time is, by this time, the endothelial pump starts to work, and this descemet endothelial complex now is nicely adhered, gets adhered to the corneal stroma. You don't need anything else. Just about a 10 minutes of time with this air gives enough time for the endothelial pump to start working and allows for this lenticule to stick nicely to the cornea. And once you are done with closing the wound and maintaining the nice chamber and having a nice IOP, then you can just simply, it's a 30 gauge needle, so you can simply remove it out. You can see the lenticule well centered there. The chandelier is removed, and in the end, the infusion is removed, the ports are closed, and this is how the patient did post-operatively. So that's another innovation that we came up with during vitreoretinal surgery, using vitreoretinal machine and equipment to help with our anterior segment surgeons there. Thank you.
Ritesh, this was another technique which came out of blues when anterior segment was struggling, surgeon was struggling, and we use our vitreous machine to help them out. The important thing is ki, what they used to, what DSEC people say ki they want to maintain a pressure of 60. And they used to put air and they used to measure with the hand and say ki pressure up 60 air, 60 air. So what we suggested, why don't you go in for a controlled infusion? So in this machine, we can tell the pressure is 60 or 30. And after 10 minutes, what used to happen, they used to decompress, because if you maintain the pressure of 60 for a longer period of time, you can land up with a central retinal arterial fluid. So in DSEC, to attach the lenticule, they have to maintain the pressure of 60. So after 10 minutes, what they used to do, they used to push one of the paracentesis valve and decompress the eye, and they didn't know how much they are decompressing. And many times the hypotony was so sudden that lenticule used to detach. Now, what the advantage in this machine is, in this system is, you want it 60, you make it 60. Now you decrease it to 20, and the pressure automatically comes down to 20, and you don't have to decompress it, and you just remove a 30 gauge needle and put in Uchi on that, and air will not leak. So the lenticule, there's not much of pressure variation during manipulation, and the lenticule stays attached. So I think all of the DSEC surgeons should practice this technique, and it will improve their results.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. I think we finished well in time for our any questions, any points that Dr. Talwar, Dr. Gupta, Dr. Hemlata, you would like to add?
See, when you're using the air fluid exchange, the air fluid machine, it depends also on the machine you're using. So if you're using a Constellation, you have to be careful. It will not backtrack on the pressure that is there. So if you've got a 60 ka pressure, and if you decrease it to 30, you've not come down to 30 yet. You come down to 30 only if you let some part of that air escape. So you can let a little bit of the air escape in a graded fashion while it is being injected from the other side. So now it will equalize at 30. But otherwise, if you were at 60 and you bring it down to 30, it's not gone down to 30 yet. It's still maintaining its 60 pressure. And if you're using a 30 gauge needle, the time it will take to equalize to 60, to reach 60, will actually be a fairly long time. So because it's a very slow injection of a gas into it. So it will take some time to reach that. It's not that you put it inside and it's 60. It will probably take a minute or so to reach the 60 ka level. And then you have to maintain it, whatever level you're maintaining. But the good thing is, you don't have to go to 60 then. You can probably go to 40. Because 60 was going because they were going to 60 because they needed to later on bring it down, and they wanted to keep it at that. So unless they really want it at 60 for some time, then yes, okay, they can bring it to 60 and then bring it down to 40 or 30, then leave it at 30 for another few minutes and then take it out. Whatever pressure you want to leave at, whatever pressure you want to leave at, you bring it to that pressure and then take it out. With a 30 gauge needle, you will not have any leakage.
Can you tell me what pressure you want in DSEC surgery?
Yeah, that's the whole point. So that is what the cornea surgeons have to decide, that if they want 60, actually need 60. Because you actually don't need 60. I think even 40 will oppose. See, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to oppose. You're not trying to, it's not as if it's going to dry it out. It's only opposing it, no? And you need
what I heard Dr. Anthony Aldedev talking about, he said that the pressure should be high really to iron out the fluid from the interface. Yeah. And if you don't iron out the fluid between the interface, you will have fluid in between. So many times you don't get a very good lenticule attachment if the pressure is not high. Yeah, so after 1 or 2 days, they have to do an releasing incision in the cornea or a tap incision.
The problem is 60 ka pressure for 10 minutes is a fairly long time. The vitrectomy machine gives us a clear cut this thing of 1 minute. It starts beeping every 1 minute. So 10 minutes is, to my mind, seems to be a very high thing. If you want to go to 60 minutes for the first 2-3 minutes, you could then bring it down to 40. At 40, you're not going to get a CRAO.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But this, Hemlata, any comments from your side about this?
I agree with Dr. DT sir, because 60 for 10 minutes is actually very high. I mean, in most of these cases, even the optic disc is a little compromised. So we have to take care of that part also.
So I think it's the right night time now with if everybody starts to use this monitored pressured system, they can actually work and see whether actually the concept of 60 was coming because it was an AC filled with air and they're trying to hopefully maintain 60. It's not something which they were monitoring.
And
before.
they didn't know 60 or not.
Yeah. So if we can start monitoring this with the machine pump and we can see even if 30 works or 40 works, then we can start getting it down further.
You see, you would put, if 40 was okay, you could do 40 for 15 minutes.
Yeah. And
5
maintain a
minutes extra you
continuous
could
air
do.
inflow.
Yeah.
So
Then I have a very simple question for all the panelists. Shall I ask?
yeah, please.
Yeah. So it's like as anterior segment surgeon, many a times when the posterior capsular rent happens and we are trying to do anterior vitrectomy and we feel that everything is fine, the vitreous is not there. And again, the more and more of vitreous keeps coming out. And that is when we call you guys to help. So as if you don't have the retina backup, what are your tips how to avoid that repeated prolapse of vitreous and what are the ideal settings for the vitrectomy cutter?
See, one thing, Hemlata, the more you hydrate the vitreous, the more it will come out. So you need to do intermittent hydration and intermittent cutting of the vitreous.
So we keep the infusion cannula on all
Don't
the
keep
time.
it continuous on. You put a little bit. What I would do is I would form the AC, then I would go at the level of just below the level of the pupil. Do the vitrectomy, let the iris fall flat, fall down. Then inject a little more, do that 3-4 times, then see do you have a round pupil. And if you have a round pupil, and the initial vitrectomy you'll do with hydration, but the subsequent vitrectomy, don't keep hydrating. If you keep hydrating, you will end up again more and more vitreous coming.
I think we have
Actually,
come
the
to that
problem
time.
what has been highlighted by Dr. Dinesh is the hydration creates a problem. So if you have done then two things what you all do you want to remove the viscoelastic after putting the lens. So don't remove the viscoelastic. Let the viscoelastic stay and do a very minimal wash so that the vitreous does not get hydrated and it doesn't get prolapsed. And don't leave the tension very high because the moment you infuse a lot of saline into it, it goes behind and brings the vitreous into the wound. So these two things you can do, leave some viscoelastic and don't make the eye very hard. And this will help you to prevent vitreous prolapse in the last stages. And another tip is that don't put tricot when the lens is not there. Because many a times what happens, you put tricot and the tricot goes behind into the vitreous cavity. So you put the tricot, once you have put the lens, then you put tricot and do an vitrectomy.
And if you use tricot, use it with a 1 ml syringe. Don't use a 2 ml syringe. You'll get a huge bolus.
With all due respect, sir, I would request you to please wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
So we'll wrap up this IC. Thank you so much. I would like to thank all my co-speakers, co-instructors for sparing their time to be in this IC. Dr. Lalit Verma sir, Dr. Dinesh Talwar sir, Dr. Gupta sir, Dr. Hemlata ma'am and Dr. Harsh sir. Thank you so much for making this IC such a wonderful lively session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you to all speakers. It was definitely quite an informative session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Thank you once again.